Science can take you to many places and make you do many things.
Ladies and gentlemen, we do thank you very much for your attention, and now we invite you to sit back, relax, and enjoy the tea.
For me, that's the best part of the job. There's also a great sense of exploration. You're taking a landscape and you're learning how to read that landscape. Like the pages of a book almost, reading what has happened in the past. We're solving mysteries. So people do many things in the name of science. For me, today, it's brought me to Kyrgyzstan, to the Tian Shan Mountains. And in a little while, I'm going to be hiking up these mountains behind us, searching for evidences of past earthquakes. We're drawn to this area because of the record of large earthquakes that have occurred within the Tian Shan. Through our work, we're trying to learn more about the general processes that are involved within earthquakes, but also trying to use our results to help to build a more resilient society for when those earthquakes occur in future. Central Asia is part of a really broad zone of earthquake deformation that crosses all the way from southern Europe and then all the way through places such as Iran and the Caucasus Mountains, the Himalayas, Tibet, all the way across to China. We class them together as the Alpine Himalayan zone. So Almaty is actually the biggest city in Kazakhstan. It's got a population of over 2 million. And it was the capital city until 1997. Almaty has a long record of large and destructive earthquakes. It was very badly damaged in 1887. And then it was also damaged again in 1889. In 1911, it was damaged again. However, all of those big earthquakes have occurred outside living memory. The recurrence interval between successive earthquakes can be measured in hundreds or sometimes thousands or even tens of thousands of years. You have to look at historical records, you have to look at archaeology sometimes, you have to go further back into prehistory, using the landscape to try and unravel the history of earthquakes that have occurred. Earthquakes are a big problem, of course, but they're a rare problem. So asking people then to prepare for something that might not happen in their lifetimes can be challenging. Remember, the next earthquake in Almaty could be in a century's time, or it could be even 1,000 years from now, but it could also happen much more soon. Hi Sarah, thanks for coming in. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
So we're looking at footage of the Spitak earthquake that occurred in 1988. This was in what is now Armenia. And it was a huge disaster. In many ways this is a good context for a lot of the places we're talking about here, right? Seeing what we're seeing here, and you can see the effects of what something like this can do. And there are so many places around the world where these risks are real, right? Why is it so difficult to prepare?
I think one of the main ways to try to understand that is to think about how we think about risk, how our brains process risk. As scientists, we tend to think of a risk of something as being a number, a probability, but for our brains, in the way that they interpret and process and make meaning, it's much more than just a number. It's very much about feelings, emotions, experiences, cultural influences. All those come to bear on how we perceive a particular risk. And the other thing that we struggle to do is to distinguish between small numbers. Let's say you had a chance of a damaging earthquake of 0.01%. And then that was increased, say, to 0.1%. That's a tenfold increase, but our brains just aren't really very good at making sense of that. So what we try to do is use techniques to help make meaning of the numbers. And when I say make meaning, that means start to get a feel, again, that emotional connection, a feel for what that number actually means for them in their context.
Thousands of people have spent the night in emergency shelters in Japan after a powerful earthquake hit the west coast of the main island.
For those who may have just tuned in, it is 10 minutes after 6, and at 4:31 this morning, the greater Los Angeles area was shaken, was devastated by a massive earthquake, registering, we are told, by Caltech.
So for example, in the earthquake space, Tokyo, Los Angeles, L'Aquila, for example, these are the types of places that people have an intuitive, emotional feeling about them being risky from earthquakes. So what we can do is we can attach what the statistic is in that place so that people can then attach that feeling of riskiness to a number, and you can then provide them with the number, with the risk statistic for their location. They can then compare, well actually this is actually quite close, the size of this number is actually quite close to this other place that I do know is risky and I do feel is risky. So by using those sorts of comparisons, we can help people to some extent start to make meaning and attach feeling and intuition to that interpretation of the more abstract risk numbers.
Good morning. We're currently at base camp at the Talas Fadanas Fault, which is the Ironman foot way up. This is our base camp.
I'm happiest when I'm in the mountains, essentially. So like for me, when I'm in these places, just being there is, yeah, it's a great thing, right? And I find calm and peace there, which is really hippie, but it's not. I think I like the challenge of the remoteness. That to me it's really enjoyable, and it feels like my hobby has become my job. So that has another side to it though, which is you don't know when to stop, and you can just work like very late if you know. And I guess I was doing that anyway when I was in my previous job. So before we go, as a broad framework, this will start maybe years in advance, you know, a week or so before, on making sure that any kit that we're taking is in good working order.
Now, we've also got to think of the sampling. So these are Neill's tool in trade here. So these are garden scrapers from Japan, but they're very good at cleaning the surface of trench excavations. Of course, any field work, we're traveling across big distances and we're looking at things that can be really quite subtle, difficult to see. Right? So we spend a lot of our time looking at satellite maps, trying to identify places that we can then visit in the field and make the best use of our time and get the most information from. Let's say you can identify things using a satellite image. Why is it then important to go into the field? The first thing is that you need to verify what you can see. Is it real? We can do this through excavation. We can dig holes. We can actually look for the faults in cross-section. The second thing we can do is we can take samples. We can date them. And if we can find successive earthquake ruptures going deeper through our excavation, so deeper into time, we can start to build a record of earthquakes on those faults that may extend over the last 10,000 years. These are the appropriate timescales to start looking at the hazard that those faults pose.
We excavate into an area we think is a fault, and then look at the stratigraphy, the sedimentary deposits, on a real micro scale. So it's day one in the field, and the idea is we're currently flying the drone to try and investigate possible sites where we can dig a trench. If we find a suitable place, we'll dig a trench, and then we can have a look at the sediments in it and see if there's any signs of past earthquakes. within those sedimentary layers. So it's a beautiful day in Kyrgyzstan. Just have a look at what I'm looking at now.
My summer travels took me next to Ulaanbaatar in Mongolia, where I was attending a workshop. Here I met Professor Robin Goodwin. Robin kindly agreed to talk to me a little bit about the psychology of trauma in disasters.
I think in reality people think they've got other things to do in their lives. So they don't pay attention to the earthquake risk unless there's some real reason to do so. But I think for the local inhabitants, you have your everyday life and your everyday experiences. You've got lots of other things to worry about.
Yep.
And in many of the areas which in Asia are most affected by earthquakes, people do have a lot of other issues in their lives. A lot of the risks are in areas where people have a number of economic challenges. So really you've got other things to think about. And to ask people to prepare in detail for a potential earthquake,
Yep.
it's quite an ask when they've got so many other things on their mind. At the same time, during any traumatic large event, it's going to affect people differently. So people who already have had a number of mild experiences of earthquakes in the past may actually be quite prepared to deal with things that come along. Those who've gone through very traumatic events in the past, though, may actually find it particularly difficult because they have a residual trauma that they carry with them throughout their lives. It's not the case that even going through a big earthquake in the past will necessarily make you psychologically stronger. Having said that, most people deal okay with a whole range of disasters. In the work we've done, about 70% of people are, over a number of years, proved to be psychologically fine. They don't have post-traumatic stress in the way that people might expect. About another 10% of people will real problems at first, but over a few years will get better. So maybe 20% will either have a continuous problem over a number of years, or will develop problems over years. One of the things you can do is to make sure that the support networks are there for people, and you sustain those. It's not just everyone goes and helps for a few months and then forgets about it. Lots of people, if they lose their homes or have to move away, they may have to do so for a period of time, so you need a sustained support structure.
Right.
And our evidence, and that of many other people find, that's really important.
Really the driving thing is to try and improve earthquake resilience. And there is this saying that's used in engineering, geology and seismology that earthquakes don't kill people, buildings do. But it's how much resources you're able to spend, and that's a health economics question for a country. What level of standard building code are you prepared to put in, knowing that that's going to be a huge expense to the economy, but it might save virtually, everybody.
Building a resilient society is challenging. It requires a very long-term view, so it requires governments to invest in things that may not happen for decades or even hundreds of years. It also brings in various elements of culture, building styles, of the use of resources and the limitations in resources. Also, we have to think about psychology, right? So to understand what happens to people and to populations, to societies, to communities when a disaster strikes. So the kind of work that we're doing is very important. Ultimately, it's helping to build a more resilient society, whether that's to populations, to cities, or whether it's to infrastructure. So much infrastructure is being built across the region right now. It means there's an opportunity to make sure that that is built as resiliently as possible. If we don't take that opportunity, we potentially increase our risks for coming decades, for coming generations.